Good morning. I would first like to thank the organizers, Mr. Asad Mateen, excuse me, and other friends here. And as I sit here, I can see so many familiar faces here. I see His Excellency Minister Pashtun here, the Honorable Mr. Hassan here, and many other friends. And I'm very pleased to be here today. I'd like to thank the organizers of this splendid event in the dream metropolis of Dubai, the jewel in the crown of modern-day cities of the world. Thanks to the visionary leadership of the founding fathers of the United Arab Emirates, and in particular, thanks to the ingenuity and superb management skills of His Excellency Sheikh Mohammed, the greatest builder of all times. I would like to begin by talking about SPA. I know I can see some smiles here. Don't get me wrong, but I have not flown here all the way from Afghanistan to talk about sauna or hot bath. SPA stands for Strategic Partnership Agreement, signed between Afghanistan and the United States. I know that the main subject here is about business investment, roads, and all these other things, that technical stuff that some of the engineers and technicians and experts are going to talk about. But I would like to draw your attention for a little while to the wider picture of Afghanistan and its future. The Strategic Partnership Agreement is a great achievement, only second to the overthrow of the Taliban and Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan in 2001. Some of us, believe me, fought an uphill battle. It was a struggle. Some got bruised in the process, but finally the pact was signed at the cost of a major defeat for a cabal of saboteurs within the government of Afghanistan. The Afghan people finally got to breathe a little easy after years of uncertainty and confusion about U.S. intention. Was it going to commit to a long-term stay in Afghanistan, or was it going to pack and leave the Afghan public unprotected against domestic and foreign packs of wolves who are still out there? Some rough estimates indicate that due to uncertainty, over $4.5 billion have escaped from Afghanistan only in the last 18 months. And this is quite a bit of money for a poor and small country like Afghanistan. At this point, I will say that I think it is befitting of a dignified nation as Afghanistan to thank the U.S. and our other partner nations for their sacrifice, hard work, and valuable dollars spent on raising an army and police force for us from scratch, giving us the resources to build thousands of miles of paved roads, schools, and clinics. I think with the exception of India and Japan, Afghanistan enjoys the most free and liberal media in the entire region, and our civil society, although still in its infancy, is growing and expanding by the day. I think I should mention here that democracy is highly in demand in Afghanistan. Some of our friends in the Western media, at times out of frustration, conclude that Afghans are not capable of a workable democratic system of Afghanistan. I think I can understand their frustration, but I would like to invite them to make these judgments in the Afghan socio-political and historical context. Back in 2001, when U.S. forces supported by a vast majority of Afghans drove the Taliban out of power, warlords, drug dealers, and human rights violators were anticipating a national backlash against them as well for their role in initiating the civil strife of the mid-1990s that killed over 100,000 Afghans and destroyed over 60% of the capital city. And these were the people that were driven out by the Taliban. As a direct consequence of a weak Afghan leadership and the unfamiliarity of Americans with Afghanistan, these elements not only survived but gradually infiltrated the government and finally re-established themselves in positions of power and influence, of course, to the dismay of the Afghan people and at a heavy cost to the democratic processes and the credibility of the Western world. The sum total of the re-emergence of these undesirable elements, a weak government, and the spread of corruption in Afghan state agencies helped the armed opposition groups, mainly the Taliban and their terrorist associates, to regain a foothold in Afghanistan. These were the conditions that substantially stunted the growth of civil society and democracy in Afghanistan and resulted in the Patriot's military surge, which successfully reduced the enemy, paving the way for the transition process underway today. I'm not trying to discourage you. I don't mean to draw a bleak picture of hopelessness, but instead I'm going to give you the solution to the problem so that Afghanistan becomes more investment and business friendly. Let me remind you that the draft and corruption and sabotage within the government against the US and NATO efforts, if quantified, put in figures, have caused over 50% of the casualties suffered by Afghans and internationals over the past 12 years of the war. Now, as we draw closer to 2014, Afghanistan will be standing at the crossroads of history once again. It will have to elect between business as usual, meaning weak governance, corruption, the rise of more violence, or work together for the creation of a strong and stable government based on the will of the people to steer Afghanistan towards stability and progress, where all businesses can also thrive and flourish. I would like to advise my noble countrymen and our valiant comrades in arms that as we get closer to 2014 and a drawdown of Allied troops will be in progress and Afghans will be preparing for the presidential elections, a broad-based international mechanism should be put in place to assist the Afghan people in the conduct of a free and fair election. And that's very, very important. This international mechanism, supported by a vast majority of Afghans, should ensure that the playing ground is level for all legitimate candidates for president. It should draw a list. It should draw a list of the bad elements and expose them even before the election. They should be warned that if they attempt to influence the election process, they will face reprisals. After over a decade of US and NATO engagement in Afghanistan, American policymakers are sufficiently wise, that's my thinking, to fathom the implications of not securing Afghanistan, because the next time around an unstable Afghanistan will not only become a haven for transnational terrorists again, but regional powers will clash over its rich mines and minerals, the mineral deposits estimated not in billions but in trillions of dollars. The instability originating from Afghanistan will engulf Central Asia all the way to the Caucasus, while Pakistan's nuclear arsenal would fall into the hands of extremists emboldened by the retreat of the US forces from Afghanistan, if that ever happens, and I hope it doesn't happen. As I have opined on some key issues in writings and meetings with US authorities, I believe the US no longer needs to maintain the the present levels of troops in Afghanistan, but it must maintain a militarily robust presence in secure bases to prevent the deterioration of the security situation until the Afghan forces become fully capable of fighting the insurgency. And that's not going to happen in 2014. I think for obtaining a better perspective on U.S. involvement in Afghanistan, we should briefly revisit history. And it's going to be really brief. The United States, back on September 11, 2001, suffered an unprovoked attack by Al-Qaeda terrorists on the World Trade Center in New York and the U.S. Pentagon building in Washington, as a result of which attacks almost 3,000 American citizens were killed in cold blood. As a consequence, President George W. Bush authorized U.S. military to topple the Taliban regime in Afghanistan and dismantle and destroy the Al-Qaeda terrorist organization headquarters based in Afghanistan. As a consequence, based in Afghanistan, in 2001 in Afghanistan, dubbed as a war of necessity, American strategists prematurely disarmed friendly armed bands, the remnants of the resistance to Soviet occupation of the 1980s, causing a huge power vacuum because Afghanistan at that time lacked a regular army and police force. In the interim, as the U.S. realized the immediate need for raising an Afghan force from scratch, the defeated Taliban hiding in Afghan countryside, and Pakistan re-emerged as a fighting force with the ability to capture swaths of territory and harass the disarmed communities. The U.S. forces, while facing the dilemma of a shortage of manpower and equipment in the early years of the war operations, also made the mistake of ignoring the strategic importance of winning hearts and minds, the empowerment of the weakened tribal leaders and moderate clergy, and failed to prevent the infiltration of former human rights violators, warlords into the Afghan administration. Today, I urge you, I appeal to you to impress upon the U.S. and other world organizations not to ignore the importance of the next elections in Afghanistan. That's going to be key for a good and prosperous Afghanistan, good for business, good for investment. These next elections are going to determine whether all the blood of Afghans and internationals and the billions spent in Afghanistan will go to waste, or it will make Afghanistan into a haven for stability and progress, a country beneficial to itself and the rest of the world. Thank you very much, and God bless you.